welcome to the magazine. Today we are very blessed to have Geneva Woodruff with us and Frankie. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here, Charlie.
Well, we're glad to have you.
Thanks for asking.
So, what is Dear Frankie?
Well, Dear Frankie is evolved to a dog column. So it's a dog advice column, but it's written by a dog, two dogs, about their social and emotional issues. And it's really a dog or a canine version of a Dear Abby. And so when I started to think about the column, I did some market research, and actually, interestingly enough, no one has ever written a Dear Abby kind of column for dogs. So It is a first of its kind. There are many columns that are written about what if my dog has a red patch, or my dog isn't friendly to the next door neighbor's dog. We have to let the dog out at different times. But nothing about what are the social issues that a dog might have.
And where did this idea come from?
Well, I think the seeds of Frankie were really planted in my childhood. I'm of the generation before television, and so children's play was very different then. So we read books. And what were those books about? Many of those books are written in an animal's voice. Winnie the Pooh, Wind of the Willow. And these were books in which animals talked about problems and issues, and particularly Winnie the Pooh, and being lonely or being shy or feeling down and that. So that was very much of it. But also my childhood was about newspaper cartoons where there were animals, and again the animals spoke and they had opinions. And then, of course, our Saturdays were spent in Saturday matinees going to the movies for children. So there were cartoons. And who were the cartoons? Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, Sylvester the Cat. So they all talked. And then what were the movies? The Walt Disney movies. And I think one of the most influential social media, I think, or media for me in childhood was Bambi. Because Bambi was the first time that I recognized that people could be unkind or mean to animals. And that was when Bambi stepped out into the meadow. And Bambi's mother said to her, "No, Bambi, step back." And he said, "What, mother?" She said, "The man." And I remember coming back, I must have been about 7 or 8, and I came back, I was so ashamed of being a person, a human, that would be unkind to Bambi. And also in that movie, there was a very funny scene of Thumper. And Thumper always was, very impulsive and talking out of turn. And so Thumper's mother said to him, "Thumper, what did Mother tell you?" And he said, "If you can't say nothing nice, then don't say nothing at all." And she said, "Right." So they were lessons of life, and I took them very seriously, and I thought they were very instructive. And then when TV came out, there was a program, I'm sure you're too young for it, there was a program, Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. And Kukla and Ollie were puppets. And Ollie was a dragon, but Fran was a person. So she stood outside of this little puppet theater and talked to these puppets. And they talked about all sorts of issues. And there was several other characters. There was a rabbit called Fletcher the Rabbit. And they all had different personalities. And Kukla was very calm, and Ollie was very naughty. He was a dragon, and he was always getting into a lot of trouble. And I think I identified with Ollie. Ollie was, I had ADHD, so I was always jumping around, but in my generation, nobody knew anything about that. And so Ollie would do bad things, naughty things, but Fran would instruct him and kind of soothe him, but she always left the impression that even though you were naughty, that didn't mean you weren't loved. And so she made that differentiation for it. In preparing for this interview today, I looked up Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. It turns out it was a rave program originally written for children, but Tallulah Bank had watched it, Adlai Stevenson watched it, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a phenomenon, and yet the theme was so simple. A little problem that they kind of talked about. So that was it.
Well, that's great. That's very. Wasn't aware of a lot of that. So, where did you get the idea of a dog giving advice to other dogs?
Well, see, I thought these dogs were real. I almost thought these puppets were real. So it never seemed to me an odd thing that dogs would talk, and dogs were always a part of my life. I had a childhood dog that was my companion. My family loved dogs. Mm-hmm. And so they talked about the dog. Sometimes they talked to the dog. And so, I always said to the dog, come on, Mitzi, let's go. And so this dog was with me all the time. And so it didn't seem odd to me that dogs would talk. And I don't know, I think that people ask if you had a magical quality or you could do something, what would it be? And some people say, fly. I would love to have the ability to fly. I think for me would be, I would love to live in the body and in the mind of someone else for a short time and see how they saw the world. Mm-hmm. Did they see color like I see color? Do they feel as I feel? How do they think about things differently? But not only for people, you, mm-hmm. But for dogs. What do dogs really think? And, the attitude towards dogs has changed dramatically over the years. Mm-hmm. Originally, dogs have always been with man. Even in cave times, but they were sentry. And then after that, dogs were working dogs. And, animals, horses, we still have that. But they were working dogs, and then they evolved to man's best friend. That is not how America thinks of dogs today. Mm-hmm. Americans think of dogs as being their children. Mm-hmm. And if you look at how or listen to how people talk about their dogs, they do talk about their dogs as having children. Will you come to my dog's dog party? Mm-hmm. Will you come to my dog's birthday party? A man was walking down the street. He had an 8-week-old puppy. So I said, hey, that's a cute little puppy you got there. Hey, she writes a column if, it's got any trouble, right? So he said to me, could you organize a dog Halloween parade? And I said, well, that's not really what I do. I just write this column. Right. He says, yeah, but because you do that, don't you think that would be a good idea to have a Halloween dog parade? So I said, well, sure, okay. So I said, well, how come you're so interested? This dog was 8 weeks old. He said, well, he wants to be in the dog parade. I said, he does? What does he want to be? He said, oh, he wants to be the Cookie Monster. Okay? So people think about their dogs as having thoughts and feelings. People say to me, I read your column last week. If you had asked my dog that, that's exactly the advice she would have given.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes. So I think the column plays upon this notion and these ideas of what dog lovers have. But it's not only dog lovers. We have dog fans. Even people who don't have dogs love dogs. Mm-hmm. And there are also all those family members that if you don't know what to buy for the family, buy something for the dog. So when I started thinking about this as a column, I looked up kind of the research. There are 63 million American households that have one or more dog.
Wow.
And in 2020, they spent $99 billion on dogs. So the fact that nobody had written a column like this, there was this group of people out there, this attitude and this feeling, I thought this would be a good column.
Did it start out as a column, though?
No, it didn't. It actually started out as a joke. So a friend of mine, this couple was getting a puppy, and they had never had a dog. And I knew that they had no idea what they were in for. So as a joke, I wrote their puppy a letter from Frankie to say, listen, let me give you some advice on how to live with them and what you could do and how to use the situation to your best advantage, etc. And these people don't know what they're doing, and they think you're a child. So you can play on that. So they wrote back from the puppy, and then I wrote something else. Somebody else's dog had something, and I wrote to that dog, and that person wrote back. So I started, when COVID started, we were all sitting here. I live alone, so I just started fooling around with this. And then I started showing it to some friends and saying, what do you think about this? And they, oh, it's great. And I thought, well, this is what they're telling an old lady who's sitting by herself. This is a great idea, write this column. So but I have friends in the newspaper business, and I have a friend who had a very prestigious position as an editor of the Washington Post. So I asked him to vet it. And then I asked some friends who were journalists of the Boston Globe, and some of the journalists down here. I don't know, Joanna Weeks, who lives in town, she looked at it. And they all said, it's publishable. Yeah, go for it. Go for it. So I called Beth David, and I said, listen, I have this idea for a column. What do you think? And she said, sure, why not? I was like, this is very easy. This wasn't what I expected. So she said, sure. Yeah, send it to me. It was great. And I must say that from what has happened since then, if Beth David had not taken the column, what has happened today would have never happened. So I'm very grateful to her for her support and her openness to take this column.
I know she was very excited about it when it first started.
Oh, is that right?
Yes,
oh,
very,
yeah.
very excited.
Right. Well, Beth's a little tapped down, so she doesn't know it isn't most effusive, except when she's talking about the politicians in town. So she's taken the column, but she really hasn't said actually that much about it to me. But I guess the fact that she continues to run it is some kind of a statement of the column.
So, Geneva, with your background in education, do you think that has given you some assistance in how dear Frankie gives advice?
Yes, because although I say Frankie is written in a dog's voice, it's really written in a childlike way. And over the years, I've worked with many children. I was a teacher, and then I went up the ranks of the public schools, ended up as a assistant superintendent, left public schools, went on to become a college professor, and then I ran many, many programs for children and their families, vulnerable children that had problems. And so many times I met with those children, and they talked about their issues. And I also worked with emotionally disturbed children, and I always used puppets.
Okay.
And the interesting part of puppets is that children sometimes will say things to the puppet that they would never say to me. So they feel safe there. So in writing the column, I think I tried to keep the voice of a child. And and phrase it in a way that a child would ask, is this really the case, or am I imagining this or that? So they're looking for that kind of assurance and advice, and also, I think, hope for, I've got this problem, and I've kind of developed a formula in writing the column. So you set the stage in the letter that comes, and then you put the dog in that setting, which causes a problem. And then the dog asks a question of Frankie. And then Frankie acknowledges the problem and then offers some solutions, and then tries to end up with, it's probably not as bad as you think it is, or really there are solutions to this, or I think you could do this, and all. So you try to end up in a positive note. And interspersed in this, you try to offer some humor, you use some words of, like, the cat swallowed, your, what is the expression? The cat swallowed your, right. And so use those kind of modern day sayings to try to make it more lighthearted.
So, and thankfully for Beth, because, she started this great column with you, for you, and published it. And has that led to other papers?
Well, it was really Beth's idea. When I met with Beth, she said to me, you could syndicate, if you got good at this, you could syndicate this column, and you could go to other newspapers about printing it. And she said, I don't own it. I'm the first. So you've started here, but it's your copyright, so if you want to go. So in the beginning, that seemed a little daunting, and also it seemed a little ambitious, because although I am a writer and I'm a published writer, I'm a professional published writer. And I wrote about children with disabilities and families and those issues. And I wrote for professional journals, which is a very different kind of writing than writing for a newspaper. Newspapers, every word costs. So you need to be short to the point. And as you see, I can be very effusive and verbose. So learning to tap it down and to really keep it tight, and it was a learning process for me. So the column started in January, and then by July and August, I felt I was ready to approach other papers. This has been a daunting task. There are best Davis say, hey, that's a great idea, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you pitch a column, you have to write to a specific editor. You best have their name, their address, their title, et cetera. And newspapers don't look kindly on any mistake. So there's a lot of
lot to it. Yeah.
Yes, and there's thousands of papers. And they don't open the emails in many cases. So I was really stuck. How could one person do this? And so a friend who was head of a journalism department said to me, why don't you go to the press associations and see if they'll put it out there? And so presently I've gone to 5 press associations who have agreed to run a newsletter. And so the column is now running in Texas, Missouri. I think it's about to run in Minnesota. And I just got a call from Louisiana to run it in parent magazines.
Wow.
So
that's incredible.
Is it?
That's incredible.
I don't know. It's been a lot of work, Charlie. And there were times when you write out and you just wouldn't hear for weeks and weeks and weeks. You figured nobody's going to do it, and then you get this email. So I've been inspired.
So that sounds like the future for Dear Frankie.
Yes. The future is, though, I have a personal future. Frankie has been a service dog for me. hearing impaired, and this little dog is woven into the fibers of my soul.
Sure.
So Dear Frankie is my legacy to her. Frankie's now 12, so we know what inevitably will be the future for Frankie in the next 4 or 5 years. So Frankie's a shelter dog, so I thought if I could get enough papers and get a weekly revenue, not great, I'm not looking to create a business or a career. Mm-hmm. Once I paid the expenses of the column, I wanted to give contributions to shelters in Frankie's name.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So
that's a great legacy.
Yeah, I thought it was it was something special for her, and so that's what the goal is. Papers don't pay very much for columns,
sure.
So anyway, we're on a roll, and I hope maybe next year at this time, Charlie, I can tell you I'm supporting this shelter or that shelter. I'm also sending the column to prisons that train service dogs.
Okay.
And to other organizations like that and that's a contribution on my part to make something lighthearted for women in prison.
Well, you're leading a fascinating life.
Thank you.
One of our heroes here in Fairhaven, that's for sure. So can you share a column? Because I know our time is coming up.
Okay. So this is the first column, and it kind of sets the stage, and it's about adoption. And actually, this is a playoff on that letter that I wrote to that puppy, which was the first. Okay. So, Dear Frankie, I'm an 8-week-old puppy. Yesterday, I was told I was going to be adopted by a couple that didn't have children. I don't want to leave my mom and siblings, but my mom told me I have no choice. I'm really scared about living with humans. I don't know anything about this or what to expect. Can you tell me what it'll be like? Dear Buster, I understand your anxiety about going to a human home. It's unfortunate that no one has explained to you that all puppies eventually have to leave their litter and live with humans. But if they're really lucky, they get adopted by a family who wants a puppy to love and care for their whole life. In the canine world, getting adopted by a couple without children is like winning the dog lottery. So here are a few tips for living with humans. For starters, I know this is going to crack you up. The couple thinks they're going to be your parents. Now here's the thing. Let them. And use it to your full advantage. Parenting, you see, is the most competitive sport in America. So they need you to make them look good. After you settle in, they're going to teach you a few commands. I know, they're not in the military and you're not a war dog, but that's what they call them. As time goes on, you will find that humans say and do a lot of strange things. Don't worry, most of it really won't impact you. So the first command they're probably going to teach you is to sit. Whatever you do, don't sit unless they give you a cookie. Later on, when they ask you to sit, pretend you don't understand and see if they'll give you 2 cookies. It worked for me. I live with a single mom. She'll do anything to make herself look good as a parent. In sum, Buster, I think you're in good hands. You're going to live a great life. If you have any questions, feel free to write. So that was the beginning. And it plays on the idea that people think of their dogs as having fun. And then, Charlie, when you came in, you asked me about this column. So I'm going to read this last column to you because you work with people with disabilities, as I did work with children with disabilities. So we share that in common. And this is about a Chihuahua who is a service dog, and this column is called I Get No Respect. Dear Frankie, I'm a Chihuahua and a real service dog. I'm not one of those make-believe emotional support dogs. My mom has a hearing disability. She's not deaf like she can't hear anything, but she does have a hard time hearing most voices and sounds. Some of the services I provide are alerting her at the doorbell or indicating somebody is talking to her. I provide many more services, but you get the idea. Here's my problem. I don't look like a service dog, and often people don't treat me like one. Let me give you an example. Yesterday, we were at the grocery store. My mom was driving a shopping cart, and I was sitting on her lap. My mom is not like crippled, but it's hard for her to walk around the store. So we were looking over the apples, and this lady came over and started petting me, and before you knew it, she picked me up. My mom is very polite, so she quietly told the woman, please, she's a service dog, and asked her to put me down. I wanted to bite her, but the rule number one in service work is to remain calm and act like a professional. The woman, of course, was mortified. They're always mortified when this happens. Before you ask, yes, I do wear a service vest, and no, it doesn't always help. When I told my friends that somebody said to me, hey, is that an old costume left over from Halloween? They thought it was hysterical. I wasn't amused. If you have any suggestions or strategies to get the respect I'm due, I would really be appreciative. Beth. Dear Beth, I'm so sorry you've had to encounter such insensitive and uninformed members of the public. This is just another example of stereotyping. If you don't look like a German Shepherd and a Golden Retriever, you couldn't possibly be a service dog. They, of course, wouldn't be sitting on their mom's lap, and so they would be seen as a working and noticeable with a uniform. Perhaps your mom could get you a bright-colored vest printed with large letters, service dog. Another idea would be she could get a sign and put it on the shopping cart, working service dog, please don't pet. Or she could use both. Or you could alert her when you see those hyper ladies coming over towards you who are about to pick you up. You might also go back to the organization that trained you and ask advice how small service dogs have handled similar situations. Keep up the excellent work, Beth. You are a heroine to us fellow canines. Best, Frankie.
Geneva, cannot thank you enough for the column, for Frankie, for everything that you've done. And we're definitely going to have another interview at some point because you have such a vast background that is just amazing.
Great. Love it. I love it. I'd be happy to do it.
So thank you so much for everything you're doing and you've done.
Great.
Thank you, Geneva.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks for inviting me.